The Marchetti estate rose out of a Long Island fog, like something built by kings who had never learned the word no. 42 rooms of Italian marble, hand-carved mahogany, and silk wallpaper imported from Milan. And inside all of that grandeur, polishing a silver candelabra that cost more than her mother's funeral, stood Isabella Rossi. 28 years old, size 18, wearing a black maid's uniform that pulled tight across her hips because Vivian Ashford had forgotten to reorder her size for the third month running. Bella had stopped complaining a year ago. Complaining, she had learned, was a luxury for women the world actually looked at. She hummed softly as she worked, an old Neapolitan lullaby her mother used to sing while stirring pots of San Marzano tomatoes in this very kitchen. Maria Rossi had cooked for the Marchetti family for 18 years before the cancer took her. She had left her daughter two things: a stack of medical bills tall enough to bury a woman alive, and a job in the same marble mausoleum that had eaten her youth. Bella had been polishing that candelabra for 2 years now. In all that time, the master of the house had never once looked at her face. Dante Marchetti did not look at maids. Dante Marchetti barely looked at humans. At 34, he ran the largest crime family on the eastern seaboard with the emotional temperature of a January morgue. His suits were always black, always bespoke, always cut from wool that cost more per yard than Bella earned in a week. He had inherited the empire from his father at 26, buried a wife at 29, and had not smiled, not once, according to the older staff, since. To Bella, he was less a man and more a weather system. She learned to work around his storms. The front door slammed open, and the storm's fiancé swept through it in a cloud of Chanel No. 5 and cruelty. Vivian Ashford, blonde, size 2, senator's daughter, socialite of the year for 3 years running, moved through the foyer flanked by two of her equally polished friends. Their laughter echoed off the marble like breaking glass. Bella lowered her head and polished harder. "Oh God, Isabella, sweetheart, is that uniform still fitting you?" Vivian's voice was honey poured over a razor. "I told the girl at the tailor's a size 20. Maybe a 22 next time, just to give you some breathing room. We wouldn't want a seam to burst during dinner service." Her friends tittered. Bella did not look up. She had learned that looking up was what Vivian wanted. The performance required an audience of one, and Bella refused to be it. "You know what she needs?" one of the friends stage whispered. "A treadmill. Or, God, just skip lunch, honey. It's not that hard." "Be nice, Poppy," Vivian cooed, tapping a manicured nail against Bella's shoulder as she passed. "Isabella's a sweet girl. She just can't help herself around a bread basket. Can you, darling?" Bella's knuckles went white around the polishing rag. She said nothing. She had rent to pay. She had her mother's remaining hospice invoices sitting on the kitchen counter of her tiny Queens apartment, red-stamped and screaming. She kept polishing. The candelabra, at least, still shone when she was done with it. That was something. Dante Marchetti descended the grand staircase then, and the room reoriented itself around him the way iron filings reorient around a magnet. Black suit, black tie, black eyes fixed on the phone in his hand. Vivian detached from her friends and glided to him, curving herself into his side like a house cat with expensive taste. She murmured something against his jaw. He did not look at her either. Dante Marchetti did not look at anyone unless he had a reason. It was, Bella had decided long ago, the most honest thing about him. He passed within 3 feet of her on his way to the study. He did not see her. He never saw her. She was part of the architecture, no more remarkable than the coat of arms carved into the mantelpiece, and in some ways she preferred it that way. Invisible women, she had learned, survived longer in houses like this one. That night, after the staff had gone to bed and the great house had settled into its groaning marble silence, Bella carried her feather duster into the second-floor library to finish the shelves she hadn't reached that afternoon. The library windows faced the rose garden. The garden was dark, lit only by the low amber glow of the path lamps. And through the cracked open window, carried on the cold October air, came Vivian Ashford's voice. But it was not the honey-poured over razors voice Bella knew. This voice was flat, businesslike, cold as a coroner's slab. "Tomorrow morning, 8:15 sharp. He always takes the Bentley to the Manhattan office on Tuesdays. The driver doesn't check underneath. He never has. I want the charge under the fuel line. I want the body unrecognizable. I want it done, and I want it clean, and I want my money in the account by noon. Bella's feather duster slipped from her fingers and hit the Persian rug without a sound. Her heart forgot how to beat. Behind the velvet curtain, invisible as she had always been, she stood absolutely still, and she listened. Bella did not sleep. She sat on the narrow twin bed in the servants' wing with her back against a cold plaster wall, and her mother's rosary nodded between her fingers, and she watched the digits on her cheap plastic alarm clock crawl toward morning like a countdown to an execution. Every hour felt like a decision. Every minute felt like a coffin lid closing another inch. Who was she going to tell? That was the question that kept circling her skull like a vulture. She was Isabella Rossi, 28, no college degree, $40,000 in medical debt, size 18, a maid. Vivian Ashford was the daughter of a sitting United States senator, engaged to the most powerful man on the eastern seaboard, photographed weekly on the arm of that man in Vanity Fair and Vogue. Who, in the entire universe, would take Bella's word over Vivian's? The head of security, Marco the consigliere, Dante himself. She could already see their faces, the flicker of amusement, the polite nod, the phone call to have her escorted off the property with her cardboard box of belongings, and her mother's rosary still knotted around her fingers. And then what? Then Dante Marchetti would walk down the marble steps at 8:15 sharp, pull the handle of the Bentley, and the world would tilt sideways in an orange bloom of fire. And Isabella Rossi would go home to her tiny Queens apartment and know, for the rest of her life, that she had heard it and said nothing. She could not carry that. Her mother had not raised a woman who could carry that. The sky went from black to charcoal to the sick pale gray of an October dawn. Bella dressed in her too-tight uniform with hands that would not stop shaking. She braided her dark hair back with the same braid her mother had taught her when she was 7 years old. She whispered a Hail Mary in Italian into the mirror, made the sign of the cross, and walked downstairs toward what she was almost certain would be the last morning of her employment, and possibly the last morning of her life. The kitchen staff were already moving. The smell of espresso and burnt sugar filled the air. Through the tall bay window over the sink, Bella could see the circular gravel drive and the black Bentley idling in the pale mist, and Angelo the driver leaning against the front fender smoking a cigarette he was not supposed to be smoking. Angelo had 3 daughters. He had shown Bella pictures. Angelo was going to die, too. Upstairs, a door opened and closed. Footsteps on marble. Dante was coming down. Bella's hands went numb. Her feet moved without her permission. She was through the swinging kitchen door, across the foyer, past the coat of arms, and the towering vase of white lilies Vivian had ordered fresh every Monday, and out through the heavy oak front door into the cold October air before her brain caught up with what her body had already decided. The gravel bit through her thin-soled work shoes. Dante was 3 steps from the car. Angelo saw her first and straightened, cigarette dropping from his mouth. Then the 4 men of the security detail saw her, and 4 Glock 19s came out of 4 shoulder holsters in one smooth, terrifying motion. All of them pointed at the Chubby Maid running, full tilt at the boss. Bella skidded to a stop in the gravel, hands flying up over her head, tears already spilling because her body understood before her mind did that she was maybe 2 seconds from being shot. Dante turned. For the first time in 2 years of living under the same roof, Dante Marchetti looked directly at her face. She could not get her voice to work. She tried. Her throat closed. She tried again. "Don't get in that car, sir," she whispered, and it came out wrecked and hoarse and barely audible over the crunch of gravel under the security detail shoes. "Please, please don't." Dante did not move. His hand was still on the door handle. His dark eyes moved over her face slowly, the way a man reads a document he suspects is a forgery. She could see him calculating. The maid, the uniform, the tears, the terror, the timing. For seconds passed. It felt like 4 years. He let go of the door handle. He took 1 step back. He raised 2 fingers. The security detail moved as one animal, Luca grabbed Bella by the elbow and pulled her backward across the gravel toward the front steps. Another man seized Angelo by the collar of his jacket and hauled him away from the fender, and the four of them retreated to the marble portico in a tight defensive cluster with Dante at the center, and Bella tucked behind him like a piece of evidence he was not yet willing to lose. "Get down," Dante said, quiet as a closing door. "All of you. Now." They dropped behind the stone balustrade. Marco appeared from somewhere with a radio already at his mouth. Bella crouched with her cheek pressed against cold marble, and her mother's rosary still knotted around her wrist, and she counted the seconds because she had to count something to keep from screaming. 1, 2, 3. Angelo, 20 feet away now, was reaching into his pocket for the key fob because Angelo had not been told what was happening, and Angelo was a good employee who started the boss's car at exactly 8:15 every Tuesday morning. 4, 5, 6. The fob chirped. The Bentley's headlights blinked their friendly little hello. 7, 8, 9. The world came apart. The blast wave hit the marble balustrade like the fist of God. The Bentley lifted 6 feet off the gravel in a blooming orange fireball, spun once in the air like a child's toy flung by a tantrum, and came down on its roof in a scream of tearing metal. Every window on the ground floor of the estate detonated inward at once. The tall vase of white lilies exploded across the foyer. Somewhere a woman was screaming, one of the kitchen staff. Bella thought distantly, from very far away. Dante did not flinch. He did not even blink. He simply turned his head slowly, until his black eyes settled on the trembling, curvy woman crouched 3 feet from him in a maid's uniform with ash and glass in her hair. And in a voice as calm as a man ordering coffee, Dante Marchetti asked the first real question he had ever asked her. "Who are you?" They did not take her to the servants' wing. They took her to the study. Bella had cleaned that room 100 times, dusted the leather-bound books, polished the enormous walnut desk, run a soft cloth over the crystal decanters lined up on the sideboard like soldiers at attention. She had never once been permitted to sit in it. Now Luca guided her, with a hand at her elbow that was surprisingly gentle for a man his size, to the deep green leather armchair opposite Dante's desk, and she sank into it in her torn maid's uniform with ash in her braid and glass dust glittering on her shoulders like some cruel parody of jewelry. Marco the consigliere stood at the window with a phone pressed to his ear, speaking in low, rapid Italian. 2 more of the men were outside the study door. Angelo, thank God, was alive. The medics were with him in the kitchen, bandaging a cut on his forehead where a chunk of the Bentley's grill had grazed him. Bella had asked about him twice on the walk up the stairs, and Luca had told her, in a voice with something like wonder in it, "The driver's fine, miss. Because of you." Mississippi. Nobody in this house had ever called her miss. Dante closed the study door behind him. The click of the latch was very quiet, and somehow more frightening than the explosion had been. He crossed the sideboard, and Bella watched, disbelieving, as the head of the Marchetti family took down a crystal tumbler with his own hand, poured 2 fingers of amber liquid into it, and carried it back across the room to her. He actually knelt, one knee on his own Persian rug, his bespoke suit trousers pressed against the carpet she vacuumed on Fridays, and placed a glass between her trembling fingers. "Drink," he said, softly, like a request, not a command. "It will help." She drank. It burned all the way down, and it did help a little, in the way that any warm thing helps a person going into shock. Dante watched her drink. He did not stand up. He stayed there, one knee on the carpet, his dark eyes fixed on her face with an intensity that would have terrified her yesterday, and terrified her now for entirely different reasons. "Tell me everything," he said, "from the beginning. Every word you heard, every detail." So she told him. Her voice shook at first, and then steadied, because there is a strange calm that comes on the far side of a bomb. She told him about the library and the cracked window and the rose garden at midnight. She told him about the flat, businesslike voice that had come out of Vivian Ashford's throat in the dark, a voice Bella had never heard her use before. She told him about the fuel line and the 8:15 timing and the money that was supposed to be in an account by noon. She told him she did not know who was on the other end of the phone, but that whoever it was, Vivian had called them sir once, and that had struck her as strange, because Vivian did not call people sir. Vivian called people darling when she wanted something, and sweetheart when she wanted to draw blood. Dante listened without moving. When she finished, he was silent for a long moment. Then he asked her 3 questions, one after the other, in the same quiet voice. What time did the call end? She told him 11:42, because she had looked at the grandfather clock in the hall on her way back to the servants' wing. Did Vivian say a name? Bella closed her eyes and forced herself back into that library, behind that velvet curtain. She remembered. She said Victor, Bella whispered. Once. Near the end. She said, Victor, don't insult me. I've been earning this money for a year. Dante's face did not change, but something behind his eyes did, a shifting, the way ice shifts on a river before it breaks. Marco turned sharply from the window. The 2 men exchanged a look Bella did not understand, and was not meant to. 3rd question. Would Bella recognize the voice on the other end of that phone if she ever heard it again? Yes, she said. I'd know it in the dark. He had an accent. Not Italian. Something East. Russian maybe. Dante rose slowly to his feet. He walked to the window, said 3 words to Marco in Italian that Bella did not catch, and Marco left the room without a sound. Then Dante turned back to her. The remoteness that had made him seem like a weather system for 2 years was gone. In its place was something Bella could not name, something that looked almost like grief, and almost like fury, and almost in a strange flickering way, like tenderness. Isabella Rossi, he said. How long have you worked in my house? 2 years, sir. My mother worked here, before me. Maria Rossi. She cooked for your father. I remember your mother. His voice softened by a fraction. She made a ragout on Sunday nights that my father said was the only reason he came home. I did not know she had a daughter. You wouldn't have, sir. I tried very hard for you not to. Something moved across his face that might have been the ghost of a smile, if his face still knew how to make one. And in 2 years, he said quietly, in this house full of men who are paid to protect me and a woman who is going to share my name, you are the only person who tried to save my life this morning. Do you understand what that means? No, sir, Bella whispered. I don't. It means, Dante said, and he crossed the room and knelt again, this time taking both her cold hands in his warm ones as if she were something fragile and holy, that I owe you a debt I do not know how to repay. It means you cannot go back to the servants' wing tonight, because Vivian cannot know she was overheard. It means you will be moved to the East Wing suite under guard and given anything you require. It means that in 3 days, when this house fills with 300 guests for the engagement gala my fiancé has been planning for 6 months, you will walk into that ballroom, and you will not walk in as a maid. Bella stared at him. Her mouth opened and then closed. Sir, I can't. I don't belong in a room like that. Dante's thumb brushed once across her knuckles, and his black eyes held hers with a steadiness that made her breath catch somewhere between her ribs. Cara mia, he said quietly, by Saturday night, that room will belong to you. The East Wing suite was bigger than Bella's entire apartment in Queens. A 4-poster bed dressed in cream silk. A bathroom of veined marble with a soaking tub deep enough to drown a small horse. A private balcony that overlooked the rose garden. The same rose garden where 48 hours ago she had heard a woman order a man's death through a cracked window. Bella stood in the middle of that suite in her borrowed silk robe and did not know where to put her hands. At 9 the next morning, the door opened without a knock and a small tornado in a lavender 3-piece suit blew into her life. Enzo Castellani, personal couturier to half the women on the Forbes list, imported from Milan on a private jet at 3 o'clock that morning at Dante Marchetti's personal expense. He was 50, silver-haired, and possessed the exact combination of theatrical warmth and merciless honesty that Bella had needed her entire life and never once received. He walked one slow circle around her. He clapped his hands together once, sharply, like a man striking a match. Madonna Santa, he breathed. A Botticelli hiding in a cleaning uniform. Who did this to you, Bellissima? Who dressed you in polyester when God dressed you in this? He gestured at her with both hands, top to bottom, as though presenting a masterpiece to a room full of Philistines. No, 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 no. We start again. From the skin out. Everything you own, burn it. I will not permit you to leave this suite in anything that has ever touched your body before this morning. Bella laughed for the first time in 3 days. It came out watery and surprised, and Enzo caught it and held it up like a jeweler examining a stone. There she is, he said softly. There is the woman we are going to introduce to New York on Saturday night. Now, stand still. Enzo works. The next 72 hours passed in a blur of silk and cashmere and the shush-shush-shush of a measuring tape moving over hips that had spent 28 years being apologized for. Racks arrived. Dolce & Gabbana, Christian Siriano, Zuhair Murad. Enzo held gowns against her collarbones the way a painter holds pigments against a canvas, muttering in Italian, discarding 2 out of every 3 with a flick of his wrist. On the second afternoon, a woman from Van Cleef & Arpels arrived with a locked briefcase handcuffed to her wrist, and inside that briefcase was a sapphire necklace the color of the deep Atlantic at midnight, 42 stones set in white gold. And Bella made a small, involuntary sound when Enzo lifted it out of its velvet nest. Blue, Enzo said. Signore Marchetti was very specific. Blue for his Regina. Blue for loyalty. He said you will wear this color every time you walk beside him for the rest of your life, and it is not my place to argue with the man. He said that. He said many things, Bellissima. Most of them I will not repeat because I am a professional. But that one, yes. That one I will tell you. The gown Enzo commissioned for her arrived on Friday evening, sewn by 6 women in a Manhattan atelier who had not slept in 3 days. Midnight blue silk crepe, so heavy it moved like water. A corseted bodice that lifted her bust and cinched her waist and celebrated every curve she had spent her adult life trying to hide. An off-the-shoulder neckline that showed her collarbones and the long, clean line of her throat. A skirt that pooled around her feet like ink spilled on marble. When Bella stepped in front of the full-length mirror in that gown for the first time, with the sapphires cold and heavy against her sternum, she did not recognize the woman looking back at her. Enzo stood behind her, his eyes suspiciously wet. Now, he said quietly, now you look like what you have always been. It only took a man with eyes to see it. Downstairs, in the study Bella had once dusted on Wednesday mornings, Dante Marchetti was building the second half of Vivian Ashford's ending. He did not raise his voice. He did not confront her. At breakfast on Wednesday, he kissed her cheek. On Thursday, he laughed politely at her joke about the caterer. On Friday, he let her show him the seating chart for the gala and pretended to care about which state senator was placed next to which oil heiress. Vivian, high on her own performance, noticed nothing. She had always mistaken Dante's silence for approval, which was the mistake that was going to finish her. Behind that silence, Marco was working. The burner number Vivian had called at 11:42 on Monday night traced through 4-shell providers to a phone registered in Brighton Beach. The name on the account was Victor Petrov. The Petrov Bratva had been trying to move into Marchetti Dock territory for 2 years. They had tried muscle. They had tried money. And when neither worked, they had apparently tried marriage, recruiting the woman closest to Dante's bedroom and paying her, in installments of 6 figures deposited to a Cayman account, to remove him from the board. Every text, every wire, every recording of every phone call Vivian had made from her personal cell for the past 14 months was in a black leather folder on Dante's desk by Friday midnight. He read the folder cover to cover. He poured himself 2 fingers of scotch. He did not drink it. He simply sat in the dark and looked at the folder for a long time. Then he called Marco in, and he spoke for 11 minutes, and Marco left the study and made 7 phone calls. And by dawn on Saturday, every exit at the Plaza Hotel had a Marchetti soldier assigned to it, and a projector had been quietly installed above the ballroom balcony, and 3 federal agents Dante had owned since 2019 had been informed of the guest list, and a message had been sent through a very quiet channel to Brighton Beach that read, in its entirety, "Come collect what belongs to you. 8 o'clock, Saturday, the Plaza. She will be wearing white." Upstairs in the East Wing, Bella sat on the edge of the 4-poster bed in her silk robe and looked at the midnight blue gown hanging on the wardrobe door. Tomorrow night, she would put it on. Tomorrow night she would walk into a room full of 300 people who had spent their entire lives being told they mattered, and she would walk in on the arm of a man who had decided, on a gravel driveway full of burning metal, that the only person in the room who mattered was her. She did not sleep, but this time it was not fear that kept her awake. The Plaza Ballroom glittered like the inside of a jewelry box tipped on its side. 300 guests, ambassadors in ribbon sashes, 2 sitting senators, for heads of the East Coast families in their bespoke black. Vivian Ashford stood at the top of the grand marble staircase in a Vera Wang gown the color of new snow, a coupe of Krug in her hand, and every camera in the room turned her way. She had waited 6 months for this moment. She had earned it, she believed, in every way a woman could earn a thing. The string quartet was midway through Vivaldi when the doors at the far end of the ballroom opened, and the music faltered, and 300 heads turned as one. Dante Marchetti walked in, but not with Vivian. On his arm, her hand tucked into the crook of his elbow, as if it had been carved there, was a woman nobody in that room recognized. Midnight blue silk that moved like water, sapphires blazing at her throat, dark hair swept up to show the long, clean line of her neck. She walked with her chin lifted and her curves on unapologetic display, and she did not shrink for a single one of the 300 pairs of eyes drinking her in. Vivian's champagne coupe slipped from her fingers and shattered against the marble balustrade. Dante led Bella straight down the center of the ballroom. The crowd parted for him the way crowds had been parting for him since he was 26 years old. He stopped at the base of the grand staircase, turned to face the room, and when he spoke, his voice carried without effort into every corner of the gilded space. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for coming this evening. There has been a change to the program. My engagement to Miss Ashford is dissolved, effective immediately. Please continue to enjoy the champagne. It has already been paid for. The silence that followed was the loudest thing Bella had ever heard. Vivian came down the staircase in a fury, her white train hissing behind her like a snake. Dante, what is this? What are you doing? You embarrass me, in front of my father, in front of the ambassador, for this? For a fat little maid in a costume. Bella did not flinch. She had spent 28 years learning how not to flinch at that word. She stood beside Dante with her hand still in the crook of his arm, and she looked Vivian Ashford full in the face for the first time in 2 years, and she did not look away. Dante's voice dropped. It went quiet in the way a blade goes quiet when it leaves the sheath. Careful, Vivian. The fat little maid saved my life on Tuesday morning. Something my fiancé forgot to do, because my fiancé was the one who put the bomb under the fuel line. The room recoiled as one animal. Vivian's face went the color of her gown. She spun toward the exit and found Luca standing in front of it, hands folded, expression pleasant. She spun toward the second exit and found another Marchetti soldier. Every door in the ballroom had one. She had walked into her own coffin in a Vera Wang gown, and she had not noticed until the lid was already closing. Dante lifted one finger toward the balcony. The chandeliers dimmed. The projector above them flickered to life. And across 3 enormous silk banners hung on the ballroom walls, the private life of Vivian Ashford began to play in high resolution. Text messages to a Brighton Beach number. Wire transfers routed through the Caymans. An audio recording of a woman's voice saying, "I want the body unrecognizable," in the flat businesslike tone Bella had heard through a cracked library window 4 nights ago. The recording played twice. Nobody in the room moved. A senator's wife began to cry very quietly into her napkin. The doors at the north end of the ballroom opened, and 3 men in FBI windbreakers walked in. The doors at the south end opened, and 4 men in long dark coats walked in. The Petra Bratva had come, exactly as invited, to collect what belonged to them. Vivian looked from one door to the other, and understood, in one clean, terrible instant, that Dante Marchetti had not simply exposed her. He had auctioned her to both her enemies and her allies in the same breath, and now both were here to claim their share. She was gone in under a minute. She did not scream Bella's name on the way out, but her eyes found Bella once across the ballroom floor, and what passed between them in that single look was not language. It was the end of something. Bella did not smile. She did not need to. Dante turned to her in the center of the emptying room. He lifted her hand and pressed his mouth to her knuckles, slow and deliberate, in front of every remaining camera and every remaining pair of eyes. "Isabella Rossi," he said, "you walked into my house as a stranger. You walked into this room as my equal. Stay, not as a guest, not as a debt repaid. Stay as mine." Bella's answer was quiet. It did not need to be loud. Yes. 6 months later, the servants' wing of the Marchetti estate had a new occupant, a young woman from Palermo whom Bella had personally hired and personally fitted for a uniform in her actual size. The East Wing suite had been converted into a private library. The master bedroom in the North Wing belonged, now, to Signora Marchetti. The medical debt her mother had left her had been paid in full on a Tuesday morning by a wire transfer Bella had not asked for and had not been permitted to refuse. She had enrolled in the culinary program at the Institute of Culinary Education. On Sunday nights, she cooked her mother's ragout in the great marble kitchen, and every soldier in the Marchetti family found a reason to walk past the door, because the woman who had saved the boss was stirring a pot, and the smell of San Marzano tomatoes was the smell of a house that had at last become a home. On the anniversary of the morning the Bentley exploded, Dante took her out onto the circular gravel drive at 8:15 sharp. The gravel had been replaced. The scorch marks were gone. He knelt on the exact patch of stone where the fireball had bloomed a year before, and he opened a small velvet box, and the sapphire inside it was the size of her thumbnail, and the color of the necklace still locked in her jewelry safe upstairs. "You gave me 10 seconds, cara mia," he said. "Give me the rest of your life." She said yes again. She said it in the same quiet voice she had used in the ballroom, because some answers do not need to be loud to be true. He lifted her off the gravel and into his arms, and the October sun came through the maple trees in long gold bars, and somewhere beyond the estate walls the city of New York went on being the city of New York, noisier, dirtier, and quietly, unknowingly, ruled by a woman who had once polished its master's candelabra in a uniform 2 sizes too small. If Bella's story gave you chills tonight, do 3 quick things before you go. Smash that like button. Subscribe to the channel for more Mafia romance stories every single week. And drop your city in the comments so I can see where in the world you're watching from. Would you have whispered the warning, or would you have stayed silent? Tell me down below. I read every single one.